Hello everyone and welcome to the fifth and hopefully the final part of this series. And in this one I'll be showing you how to build the setting screen. So the setting screen is going to be the screen where we change some attributes like the country we want to search for. We can also change the sort order and some other attributes provided by the Nestora API. But before we do that, I would want to make some corrections in our previous logic. If I place a search currently, let me just do a quick search, and Liverpool. Our logic here states that the child count of this list view in our search screen is going to be over here, the get property count plus 1, and the get property count is going to be 10 because back in our API we set that to 10 items. So 10 plus 1 is going to be 11 items, but this logic is currently wrong because if we do this, we have 10 items from the Nestora API. We also have this one container we added here that makes it 11, and also when we get to the end we have the circular progress indicator which makes it 12. So I'll come over here and do a plus 2 instead of a plus 1. We added plus 1 initially when we added this container over here to display the total. So when we added this second logic to add the circular progress indicator, I forgot to add the extra 1. So when we add this plus 1, it makes it 12 items. So the 10 properties plus this container and finally the circular progress indicator. And for the circular progress indicator, when we go back up, we did a logic here. If the model has more pages, then return a circular progress indicator. So the next thing will be inside this if statement, if it does not have more pages, that means if it gets to the end, I'll just return a container. So our application won't give us any error. So I'll just return a container. And there's one last logic I want to implement over here. So if we scroll over here, so this is the first item we did here. If index is equals to model.get property count, that means if the index is equals to 12 right now. So if I scroll in this is 1 2 3 4 oops. Okay, so I just want to do this 1 2 3 4 items now. Fifth item, sixth. Oops, why is this stuff clicking? So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So you can see it doesn't show the last item, which is the 10th element. Instead of showing the last item, it shows the circular progress indicator. So to correct this, we have to do index equals to model property count plus 1. And what this means is if the index is equals to the property count, which is 10 items plus 1, 11, that means when the index is at the last element, then you show this progress indicator, and this last element comes after this 10 items over here. So if I do a hot restart, because if you check your code currently, if you followed this tutorial step by step, you would see that it returns 9 items instead of 10 items. So to fix that, the first thing to do would be to go over here and increase the child count by an extra 1, and to come over here and say if this index is equals to the last item of the last index of our list view, then you should return a circular progress indicator. So if I just quickly do, let me just do Brighton. So if I quickly do this now, you see if you count it, but there's no time for that, but if you count this element, it is going to be 10 items. Then at the 11th index, it will display the circular progress indicator. So that is that for this. Then the next thing I want to do would be to go and create the setting screen like I promised. So we'll create a stateless component over here, and we'll call it settings screen. Then I'll do my imports. So for this settings screen, we're gonna go back to this search widget over here. This search screen, the UI widget for the search, and we would create, where are you? Okay, yeah. So on top, we would navigate to the settings screen. Then we'll navigate to the settings screen. Then we import it. Cool. So when I save this and I click on this, it takes us to the settings screen. But the settings screen is currently blank. So what I'll do for this would be to return a scoped model descendant. But first of all, let's import the scoped model class file, I mean. So over here we'll do scoped model descendant, and it should be of type property scoped model. Then I'll import that. Then there's something I forgot to mention. Over here in our project settings, I removed the scoped model file from the models directory, from the models package, and I placed it in a separate package called the API. So the reason behind this is just to differentiate our built value classes from our scoped model classes. So the scoped model, property scoped model belongs to a separate package, which is the API package over here. So you guys can do that by just clicking on the file, then refactor, then you move the code to make it safe while moving it. So let's continue with this. So the first stuff it's going to need, it's going to be a builder. And this builder is going to have a context, child, and model. So over here, I'll return a scaffold. We've done all this stuff previously, so it should be straightforward. So we have the app bar, and for the app bar, we pass in the title, which is going to be a text field. Then I'll pass in settings. Let's save and see. Okay, cool. So we now have the settings screens. So the next thing to do would be the logic behind this settings screen. So if we head back to our Nestora API screen, over here we have some query parameters, and we also have some query parameters, and we've used some of them. Like we've used the number of results where we set it to 10, and we've also used the page to check the current page. So the stuffs I'm going to use from here will be the sorts, and I'll also use the listing type. Those are the two things I'll use, and I'll also use the country. I'd also use the country because the Nestora API provides us with some countries we're going to be using, but that's not part of the query parameter. I'll show you how that works. So we have different countries here. So by default, I was using UK. So we have Mexico, Italy, India, France, and some other ones. So we're going to create a setting screen whereby we can actually change these values from there, and later on we'll persist it using the shared preferences plugin. So let's head back to Android Studio and see how we work on this logic. So I will just copy and paste some of all these variables I've created instead of doing it manually. So here are the values. So I just created a list of maps with string values inside them. So you can see the listing type, buy, rent, share, and all this value is gotten from the API over here. So if I head back up, you can see the listing type is either buy, rent, or share. So that is where I got all these things from. So it's going to be a list of map with a name key and a value key. So the name key is what's going to be displayed in the drop-down button, and the value key is the actual value we are saving for the API. The same thing after the listing type list, we also create the listing type, which by default I would just make it rent. Cool. Then we also have the country list, which I just created from this same API over here. So this is the display value, this is the display we are going to see, and this is the actual value we are sending to the API. The same thing, we also create a country, and the country by default should be UK. Then I remember all these fields are private fields to this class. Then the last one is the sort list. So by default, the sort list is sorted by relevance. So we can actually do the sorting by ascending order in the bedroom, the price, old and new. So the default value I'm going to give this is going to be relevancy. Cool. Then we also have the public fields over here, which you can just copy and paste from the repo, because I won't be explaining this because we've done all this before. So the next thing would be to actually create the functions for this. So the first function I'll be creating would be to change the country. So I'll create a new function, void. What am I going to name this? Change country. Let's set country. So it's going to take in a string value, and I'll just make it C. Then country would be equals to the country you passed. Then remember our handy function, notify listeners. So I'll do the same for the other two. So these are the three. We have set country, set listing type, and set sort. So the new value is going to be gotten from where we call this function, and we call the notify listeners to update all our whole values from our model. So this is it. So the next thing to do would be to go over to our settings screen, and let us create the body over here. Nope. Okay, outside here. We'll create the body. Body, which is going to be a list view, and the children would just be a bunch of list tiles. Yep. Put a comma, and title, the first one would be country. Wrap this in a text widget. Then the next item here would be a drop-down button, and for that we'll just create in our UI widgets, I'll create a new file which I'm going to name drop down button, yeah. And I have already created this, so I'll just paste it and explain. So we've done this same concept, we've used this same concept in our currency converter. We also used it in our YouTube UI. So if you followed any of those tutorials, this code should be pretty straightforward for you. So it's just a drop down button, and the value, we're going to get the actual value as from the constructor. And also what the main thing happening here is that we're going to map through the items. And remember, the items is going to be a list of map, just like here in our property scope model. You can see the items here. they are all maps inside a list. So that is why in our drop-down button over here, I did items.map. Then the initial value, the individual map would create a new drop-down menu item. So the value is going to be this value, and the actual value is going to be the item.value, and the display text is going to be the name. So the actual value is going to be this stuff, and the name is going to be this stuff. So it's going to display by, but you are saving it with this lowercase by. So back in our drop-down button, at the end of when we finish mapping, we called the toList function. And also one more thing here is during the unchanged event. So whenever I select any other item, you should call this unchanged and pass it the value. So this unchanged is going to be passed through our constructor here. So we'll head back to the settings screen and make use of this custom drop-down button class over here. So in our settings screen, the trailing is going to be this custom drop-down button. Then we'll import it. So the first item is going to be, the first argument is going to be the value. So the value is going to be model.country, which is going to be UK, just like we set. Then the next one is going to be items. The items is going to be model.countryList, which is a list of map. Then the final one is going to be the unchanged event. So unchanged is going to be model.setCountry, and this value, I'm not going to pass it here. So we've used this concept. So we are just passing the function. We are not actually executing it. So inside this custom drop-down button over here, we then pass the value, which is going to be gotten from this drop-down button. So we pass it here. So this unchanged function we are calling here is this model.setCountry, but we are not passing the value here. We're going to push it down the tree into this drop-down button and pass the actual value. So if I head back, if I save this, let me save this and see how that looks in our UI. You can see, so it is going to display United Kingdom, but the actual value is going to be the UK with the underscore. So let me just show you what I mean. So I'm going to do subtitle over here. We'll remove this later on. So I want to just show you what I mean. So model.country. So you can see this is the actual value, but this is the display name. So if I click on this, you can see different countries. If I select Italy, it shows IT. So that's pretty much the idea of what you want to do. So I would just add a divider over here just to separate things. Cool. So I'll also change this back to UK. Cool. So I'll do the remaining settings and I'll come back. So we had done with this. So you can see rent and relevancy at default values, and you can see they all display here. So this is the basic structure of our listing, of our settings. So now you might be asking, okay, how do we actually use this stuff? So I'll head back to our search screen, our property scope model, and I will pass these values down here. In our get data function, I would have to add them over here. So the first one is okay. We have listing type. We also have sort. Okay, so listing type is going to be listing type. Then the next one is going to be sort. Cool. So we're going to use them to query this API. Now, the next one is going to be the country. And this country is going to be gotten from this URL over here. So what I want to do would be to, because if you look at this, let's head over to the examples over here. You can see UK is .co.uk, but Italy is Italy is nestoria.it, while which country is BR? Let me check. Okay, Brazil, while Brazil is .com.br. So I'm going to have a way to structure this so it won't give us any problem, because if I just come over here and do something like this and just say I want to pass in country, it's going to give me a problem when I change it to Germany over here, because Germany is .de and not .co.de. So I'm going to build this stuff differently. So what I'm going to do here would be to create a string and name it top level domain, because that is what I think they call the last part of the website URL. So top level domain is going to be country by default. That means okay. So top level domain is going to be country by default. So it's just going to be, let me remove this. Yeah. So it's just going to be this last part over here. It's just going to be DEES or FR, because majority of these URLs have this structure. So the only difference is the one for Brazil and the one for UK. So by default, it's just going to be the country. Then the next thing to do would be, let me remove this and pass in top level domain. I should make this, okay, no, it's already within the function. So what I have to do here is just a simple if statement. So if country is equals to BR, then top level domain would be equals to com dot top level domain. Else if country is equals to UK, then it should be top level domain equals to co dots. What am I doing? Okay, it should be .com dot country. I hope you got what I just did. So for the next one, it's going to be .co country. So where are we? Okay, so what I just simply did here is, if by default it passes the country variable, which is going to be either BRFRDIN. So by that is it by default. But if the country is Brazil, it should be country. So it should be com.br. Then if the country is UK, it should be co.uk. So that is the simple logic I just did here, co.uk. So we pass it over here to API Nestoria dot the top level domain. So let us save this and see if this works. Let's head back to settings. Everything looks good. So I'll bring back my emulator and I would search for France. So you see it changes to FR, so it's going to be .fr. So over here I can now search for Paris. how to configure the emulator to work with my keyboard. So let us search for Paris. You can see cool, you can see it is actually searching in Paris. Then I can also come back here and do I wanted to sort by the price should be from high to low, that is descending price high low. This is the value we are sending to the API. So if I search again, remember I told you guys to integrate this search button over here with your text controller from your search UI widget, but I'm not going to do that. I'll leave you guys to do that. So you can see the first price is going to be quite high. It won't be 1,400. You can see it's 40,000 euros. So the last one we're going to do is the listing type. I want it to be buy. So the prices would be quite high now because you want to buy those houses. These are the houses up for sale. You can see our stuff is actually working. So this is something good. So we set it from UK to France, rent to buy, and from relevance to descending. So watch what happens right now. If I do a hot restart, or okay, let me do something. Let me search, let me search for Liverpool, and see what happens. It's going to give me an error from my built value. Yes, so you can see it's having a problem deserializing, because if I come over here, I'm looking at this line over here. So if I come over here, it said trying to construct response with a new null field total pages. So the total pages is going to be null because Liverpool does not exist in France. So what I'm going to do would be to annotate the total pages with the nullable annotation. So I head back to our Nestera models over here. Then I'll just add a nullable field for all these values in our response. I hope you guys get the idea of what I'm doing. So I'm just going to put it in total results just in case you search for something that does not exist. Then I'll also put it for total pages. Is there anywhere we could have these issues? Okay, no. We just need it in our response, because if I come over here, I think I should have. So let me just do the request so you see what I mean. So I'm going to copy this, paste it, and pass in Liverpool as place name. So when I do the search, you would see, where's our response? This is our response. So you can see total results 0, but yeah, so total pages is equals to null, because if this listings is empty, it means that there is no total pages. So it does not return total pages. So it is null because it's not part of our response. So that was why I actually passed this nullable field to all this. So it's affecting total pages. Then what we have to do here is just to do simple Flutter packages pub run build runner. So this same command, we just have to do it to update that. So while we wait for that out, so it is succeeded. So there's something I wanted to point out now. Let's close this. Back in our settings, if we do a hot restart, that means we kind of like, if you exit the application and come back to your application, let's see what happens. So let's head back to our settings. So our settings should have France. Whoa, why? You see, back in our settings, we now have back UK, rent, and relevancy. And previously we had France, buy, and descending. So the next thing would be to find a way to persist this information. So we want, whenever we close this application and reopen it, those values we saved previously should be persisted. So the solution to actually solve this problem, we're going to use shared preferences. So shared preferences is just a simple plugin. It's actually an Android thing, although this plugin wraps the NS user defaults for iOS devices for Flutter. So what shared preferences does is that it just stores, it persists simple information, just like key value pairs. So from this stuff, you can see the key could be country, the value could be UK, key listing type, value rent. So these are simple datas, it can persist. So you can't use shared preferences to persist something like an array or complex data structures. So for our use case, this would solve our problem. So first things first, we're going to install shared preferences. So we add this in our dependencies, in our popspec.yaml file. So I'll add this and the packages that get. Cool. So we might have to restart our application, but let me write down and see if this works. So I'll head up here in our property scope model, then I'll do an import of shared preferences. Then inside this place, the first thing we want to do would be, whenever our application starts, we should initialize these values. So over here, if we last set it to France, whenever our application starts, it should check the shared preferences database and initialize all those values. So what this means is that when you just install this application for the first time, if you don't have those values in your shared preferences, you could set the defaults just like we've done over here. Because back here, we set the defaults like here. The default to country is UK, but we're going to be working on this logic using shared preferences. So I'll create a function called initialize values first of all. Where will I put this? Okay, yeah, over here. I'll call it initialize values. And what I'm going to do here would be to create a shared preferences instance. I'll call it pref equals to, it's going to be returning a future, so I'll do shared preferences dot get instance. So it's going to get the instance of the shared preferences from our application. So this is complaining, so I'll just make this an async function. Okay, and it complains no more. The next thing I'm going to do would be to set the initial values. So I'm going to head up here and just remove this. You can leave them if you want. You can leave them, but I'll just remove them. I want to do that using our shared preferences over here. So I'm going to do first country equals to prefs. Let me make this past tense. Prefs dot get string. What's the string? Country. If it is null, then I provide you with UK. Cool. So prefs.getString, this is the key that is going to be used to store it in our shared preferences database. I'm just using the word database. I don't think it is called a database over here. Okay, the data will just be persisted on the disks. So this is just going to store it in our storage. So in our disk storage, this is the key it is going to use to store the value of country from our model. So what this simple logic does is that it should try to get this key. And if this key is null in our disk storage, initialize it to UK. So that is that. So I'll do the same thing for the remaining two. Listing type, listing type. The default should be rent. Then the final one is sort. So this is the key I'll use to store it. Sort and relevancy. So I shouldn't have removed all this. So you should put them back if you want to. Why? Simply because in case this our logic here fails, we already have something by default we are hand coding. So just to play safe. So I could go put them back. Or you just do that, I'll put that back later on. So cool. So we have this initialize values, which is going to be gotten from the shared preferences. So if any of these values don't exist, if they are null, if it returns null, initialize them with these values we passed over here. So the next thing we'll do would be to head over to call this initialize value whenever our application starts. So I head over to main.dat, and in main.dat, remember we created an instance of our scoped model. So in our build method, I could just come over here and do, remember this is our root application that is loaded by a main function. So I could just come over here and do initialize values. Cool. So I just have to do a hot restart. So whenever you start your application, that function would be run. So let's see what is happening. So you can see missing plugin exception, no implementation found for method gets all, channel plugin, blah blah blah. So it's talking about something that has to do with method channel. So when I was doing this, when I encountered this, I just had to restart my Visual Studio. So that's, did I restart the Visual? I think I just stopped this debugger and ran it all over again. So I'll do that. If it did not work, then I'll just restart my Visual Studio and this error goes. So I'll do that and come back. So you can see the error doesn't appear anymore. So I had similar problem while using the URL launcher too. So I had to just stop my debugger and stop running the application. Then I ran it once more because most of all this, I'm coming. Okay, so because most of all this stuff like this, like for instance, shared preferences is a plugin. It is not just a package. So a plugin, it works with our native code. So whenever you still have your application running, I think it has to update something with the Gradle and your native code. So whenever you install a plugin, you just stop it, then start it all over again if you see any problem related to method channel. So that is that for that. So I think now I'm going to change this to, you can see it actually got the value. If you look at our scoped model, remember we did not set it any longer, but you see it got United Kingdom, rent, and relevance. So you can see over here, UK, rent, and relevancy. So the next thing to do would be to actually change one of these and do a hot restart to check if our logic actually works. I just did some push-ups in between the project restart, so that's why I'm breathing heavily. So let's see. So we've synced this. So if we head back here, it should show us Germany. Whoa, something is wrong, and it's still showing us United Kingdom. Can anybody guess why this is not updating? The answer lies in this function. Can you guess why this stuff did not update to Germany? Anybody? Okay, we did not call notify listeners. So when we call this now, it's going to notify our model that these values have changed. So if let me just do a hot restart first of all, because it just got them from the shared preferences, but you did not update it, so it's just still going to give it some values. So I'll change this thing to let me change it to India because I have lots of Indian subscribers. Thank you guys for subscribing. So I'll just do a hot restart and it should initialize the values, then call notify listeners. So when I click this, I should see, whoa, why? Okay, let's see why this is not working. Okay. Oh, wait. Let's debug this together. Listing type. Okay. So I think if you've been following me, you should get why this works. So this first one is correct. Whenever we start this stuff, it should just initialize all these values from the shared preferences, dict storage, then call notify listeners. So what we actually did here currently, if I do set country, for instance, if I change it to India, it sets it in our local model over here, this our scoped model. So if I go back and do a search, for instance now, if I do a search in, where India, okay, Delhi. So if I do a search, in our local scope now, in our project scope, this value actually changes. But on our dict storage, using shared preferences, this value does not change. So what we have to do is, whenever we change, let's open this up. So whenever we change any of this value, while we are updating it in our scoped model, we should also update it in our shared preferences. So to achieve that, I'll come over here and just create okay, after notifying listeners. Okay, I just think it's good practice to call that last. So the next thing would be to create a shared preferences instance. I should have just copied this, but let's just write down. So shared preferences dot get instance. Then I'll make this an asynchronous function. Then I'll await this over here. Then what I'll call would be prefs. Okay, prefs dot set string. The key should be country, and the value should be country. You guys get the idea now. So I think, let me just put this notify listeners up here. So it will be kind of like sequential. It doesn't matter, but I'll just do it this way. Okay, so the first step is for the scoped model. I set the value to country and notify the listeners. Then the next one is to store it in our dicts using shared preferences. So I'm just going to call prefs blah blah blah, then set string country should be updated with the current country from our drop-down list. So whenever we do a hot restart, it should also get the same value. We've set it from our local scope previously. And there's something you should watch. The value over here should be the same as what you declared up in your up while you are creating this preference key. So they must tally. If not, it will return null, or it will give you an error. I don't know, I've not tried that. So we'll do the same thing for the remaining two. Oops. Okay, so I'll just listen to play safe. Where? Okay, I'll just copy this so I know. But if you were to do this professionally, all these values, you could just create constants somewhere up in your class, so you don't have to copy paste this way I'm currently doing. So you could just create a constant and assign these values up. So whenever you call those constants, it will give you the correct value. So if you call the wrong, if there's a typo in your constant name, your compiler would give you an error. So, but I'm just going to do this manually for this tutorial. So you get this whole logic now. So we have it stored in a model and also have it persisted on our disk. So listen type and sort. So I'll save this and do a hot restart. I want to do a hot restart, so to initialize everything from the start. So I'll change this to India, then I'll do a hot restart, and I come back here and it should be India. Woo! It's working. So we can also do the same thing for this. Let's just do price descending. So India by descending. Let's check if it's working. So the hot restart is just simulating when you close your application and you come back. So this should work on your mobile device and you can see everything is working. So I could come over here and do Delhi. But let's go back first of all and do Liverpool. It should show nothing found over here because we've had that logic before. Whoa, there's Liverpool in India. I never knew about that. Okay, let's just do Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos. Wow, just learned that today. Liverpool in Delhi. Wow. So Lagos. There can't be a Lagos in India. Wow. I don't know what's happening. But let me do. Okay. Let's stop being distracted. So you can see it is actually working. It is searching for places in. Something looks wrong, but let me check. Delhi. Okay, this is Delhi. 15 bedroom. Wow. Okay, then I just wanted to search for a place that doesn't exist in India. Let me do Delphi and see. Like India has everywhere. Wow. India doesn't have everywhere. So I just did a random search of rubbish. I just typed in rubbish and you can see it's brought back nothing found. So our logic seems to be working. So we can also change this because this place doesn't exist in India. It shows nothing found. And I've shown you how to handle this logic. So I could actually change it to Germany. And you can see DE over here. I would remove all these stuffs. I would just go remove them right now in our settings screen. I will just comment them out. So you can also see it from the GitHub repo. What was the last one? So, okay, cool, looks better. So where are we now? In Germany. So I could just do a simple search. Berlin. I'm just making this video unnecessarily long. I think we're done. So you can see Berlin actually works. So there was something I did not mention. I was supposed to mention that, or I added it in the last video description of something I did not really explain well, and that was that memoized keyword. I can't remember whether I've explained that in this tutorial already, because it's getting quite long and I can't remember. So in our properties built value class, I gave a silly explanation for this memoized annotation, although I give a good explanation in the description. But what this simply does is that whenever you annotate a field with memoized, what it does is that, like for this function now, this keyword list function, if you annotate it with memoized keyword, it means that once it has calculated this, executed these functions to build this list of keywords from this keywords string, if the keywords value over here doesn't change and you request this keyword list, it is not going to call this function again, because if you don't have this memoized keyword, whenever you want to get this keyword list, it will execute this function. So imagine you have this keyword list to be the same value and you call keyword list like 5 times in your application. It is going to execute this function 5 times. But with the memoized keyword, what it does is going to kind of like lazily build this function. What that simply means is that it is going to get this function's value and store it in a hidden instance field. So build value does that for us. It's going to store this keyword list in a hidden instance field. So whenever you need this keyword list and the values, like this keyword values, doesn't change, it's just going to get the keyword list from the instance of this property class. So the reason for this is just for performance issues, for performance reasons. So with this kind of stuff, you don't have to always execute this function every time where it is giving you the same result. Well, so I thank you all for keeping it up to this point in this tutorial series. This is the end of this tutorial, and I hope to see you guys in the next series or in the next video, and don't forget to share and subscribe. Okay guys, see you.